as if the peace were already there. And when they were placed in the war-torn areas in the early 1980s, the first Lebanese-Israeli war, during the window of time that the experiments were conducted, the terrorist activity stopped completely. Crimes against people declined. Emergency hospital room visits declined. And the scientists did it again and again just to make sure it wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a certain holiday or a certain time of day or a lunar cycle or anything like that. And they published the results in a magazine. It was called the Journal of Conflict Resolution, December of 1988. And it was from these kinds of results that the other studies began. The bottom line to all of this, we could talk about any of these individually, make a whole program of it, but the key is, and what's being shown, is that something we do by choice inside of our bodies is having a direct effect on the world beyond our bodies, whether it's the healing of a cancerous tumor that we spoke about in the first segment, or whether it's peace between nations that we're talking about now.
Is it because is it because it's affecting other people, or does it truly have some kind of an effect on an event?
Well, probably both are happening, and the Princeton studies, great scientists, wonderful people to work with, and I have tremendous respect for them, and I want to honor their work. They were the first to say, we don't know exactly why this works the way it works. The sense is, the suspicion is, that a few people focused who have learned to hone this language, they will transcend many people who are chaotically having this experience but don't know that they're doing it. In other words, people just going about their lives and don't really know what it is that's happening in the Middle East, for example, and a relatively few number of people who have honed the heart-based emotion of peace. And peace is what was experienced while they were doing that. And what it tells us statistically, George, the formula that was put together based on these studies tells us that relatively few people can have a profound effect on the world around them, on their communities, and even between nations. When we have learned to feel these feelings, not think them in our minds, and not ask that they be granted to us. We all do that from time to time, and that's a form of prayer, and it's good. It works. And this is a different way of looking at the world, suggesting that we're part of everything we see rather than separate from. And because we're part of all that we see, we're part of the solution as if we choose.
So is it safe to say we know it works, we just don't know how it works?
I think that's a good thing to say now. We could study it for another 100 years, George, and we may not understand it fully. But I believe we do understand it well enough that we can apply what we do know to help us become better people and create a better world in a world where we're facing unprecedented challenges in recorded human history, and where many people feel that if we're not at the brink, we're close to a brink of making choices that cannot be reversed and will forever change life as we know it in a way that we don't want to make those changes. Whether we're talking about a third global war, we're talking about nuclear proliferation, we're talking about powerful viruses on the planet that medicine doesn't know what to do with. As different as those things all seem, all of them are linked through this field, this divine matrix, and we now know that we are empowered as individuals and collectively when we learn the language. First, it's just becoming aware of how this field works. Secondly, it's learning to speak to this field in a way that is meaningful and responsible in our lives. So the fact that everything's connected, George, I know it's nothing new. We've heard it so long for many people, it almost doesn't mean anything because they haven't been able to use this connection in their lives. This work now is showing us not only are we connected, but this field provides the container and the bridge between our inner and outer worlds and the mirror in the world around us for what it is that we choose to create in our hearts. And the irony is that to have collective results, we've got to learn to work together.
How does evil fit into this, Gregg?
Well, that's a really good question. It might be too big to address before we go to the top of the hour, but what scientists now believe, what the evidence shows, and what 5,000-year-old texts tell us, is that this field appears to be neutral, an unbiased field. In other words, it doesn't know about our judgments of right and wrong and good and evil. It simply reflects what it is that we give it to work with, on the one hand. On the other hand, and this is, I think, the answer to the question you're asking, George, what the studies have shown, what scientists found, is that whatever someone wants to place into that field, they will experience in their bodies first before it ever goes anywhere in that field. So for those who are choosing to use this field for peace, love, compassion, understanding, their bodies, those are life-affirming emotions. And their bodies, that's the signal that sends the information to their brain that floods their bodies with life-affirming chemistry, and that life is what's perpetuated through the field. Anger, hate, jealousy, rage, those are life-denying emotions. And whoever it is that is attempting to send those kinds of energies in this field, they'll experience them in their bodies. Their heart will send that anger, hate, or rage to their brain, and their brain sends life-denying chemicals, increased stress hormones, lower immune response, decreased DHEA levels. And this is what the laboratory experiments are showing. So it's almost like a fail-safe. It's the field. I don't want to say the field doesn't care, but it's really a neutral field. And because of the way our universe, this corner of our universe appears to work, we experience first whatever it is that we choose to put into that field before it ever goes anywhere else.
But are you saying it does not distinguish the difference between good and bad?
The way the field, the quantum essence, the stuff itself appears to be neutral and unbiased. It is the word that the scientists, the experimenters are using. The consciousness within that, and this is probably what we're going to get into in the next hour. What does this field mean in terms of consciousness? What does it mean in terms of heaven? What does it mean in terms of multiple dimensions? You were talking about these in your first hour of your program tonight. Telepathic experiences, out-of-body experiences, all of these things come into play when we're talking about the divine matrix. So it's not that the field itself appears to be a neutral field, but the consciousness within that field does know about right, wrong, good and bad.
See, I think if someone, and just hear me out for a second here, Greg. Actually, a second is all you're going to hear me out for because we're at the top. So we'll come back and talk about this when we come back, Greg.
Great.
But basically, I want to talk with you about how an individual uses this divine matrix and how it can backfire on him if he doesn't use it the right way.
Sure, I'll meet you here at the next hour.
You got it. I'll be back in a moment. Gregg Braden, our special guest tonight. Last hour, we'll open up the phone lines on Coast to Coast AM. Our special guest tonight, Gregg Braden, and he's next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Norrie with Gregg Braden. Greg, you always say that we're in this matrix, but a lot of people aren't aware of it. They don't know how to use it. So what good is just being in it all the time?
Well, I think the answer to that question, George, is what our time in history is all about. And this, I thought we probably wouldn't get into this till the next hour, but we can do it right now. I think this...
this is the next hour, Greg.
Well, the conditions... The conditions we find ourselves in the world today, George, I think are pushing us to accept the responsibility that comes with knowing what we know and using our technology the way we use it in the world. I heard during our station ID a couple of times. There's an interview with you, and you're referencing, and the term was being used "end times." Were the listeners hearing that as well, or was that just on my end?
Just on your end.
Ah, okay. Well, it was. I know you've had a lot of guests on who are talking about this being a very unique time in the history of our world, in the history of our civilization, and what that uniqueness means. It means different things to different people. Are we heading toward a time where things are going to change? Probably. Is that change destined to turn out one certain way? Probably not. And I think rather than looking at it as a time of end times, I think what we're looking at is a time where we individually and collectively get to find out the level of mastery that we have in this universe. It's like we've had the training wheels on for so long. And as those training wheels come off, we are discovering